how influence learned to travel. For a long time, influence stayed where it was earned. It accumulated slowly, tied to institutions, titles, and places that everyone recognized. Power moved outward from fixed points, carried by authority and reinforced by proximity. But that era ended quietly, without resistance, without ceremony. London felt the shift before it could explain it. Influence began arriving without passing through traditional gates. Decisions took shape elsewhere, then arrived fully formed. Outcomes were shaped by actors who were present everywhere and nowhere at once. Influence had learned how to move. To understand why this mattered, we must return to the moment when connection overtook position. Technology collapsed distance. Networks replaced chains of command. Coordination no longer required co-location. Influence detached from offices, boards, and jurisdictions, and attached itself to timing, alignment, and reach. At first, this looked like decentralization. Power appeared to spread evenly. But something more precise was happening. Influence was not dispersing randomly. It was concentrating around those who could synchronize action across systems. Those who understood how to move ideas, expectations, and responses faster than institutions could track. The reveal emerged when influence stopped needing permission. A well-timed signal could shift behavior across markets without formal authority. A shared assumption could steer outcomes without instruction. Influence traveled through trust, expectation, and anticipation, carried by networks rather than commands. London remained central, but differently. The city became a conduit, not a source. Influence flowed through it, amplified by its connections, but rarely originated there alone. Power no longer waited for endorsement. It arrived already aligned. This mobility changed everything. Influence could appear suddenly, peak quickly, and disappear without accountability. It could shape outcomes before rules could respond. It rewarded agility over legitimacy and speed over deliberation. London was now operating inside a system where influence traveled faster than authority could follow. And once influence learned how to move freely, the challenge was no longer how to project power, but how to recognize it before it had already passed. As influence became mobile, London's financial ecosystem adjusted its instincts. Participants stopped looking upward for approval and started scanning outward for alignment. What mattered was not who spoke, but who others listened to. Influence revealed itself through reaction rather than declaration. This changed how decisions formed. Signals no longer needed authority to matter. They needed uptake. A view gained influence only when others acted on it. Influence became conditional, sustained by momentum instead of mandate. It traveled through expectation, not enforcement. Networks replaced institutions as the primary carriers. Conversations mattered more than announcements. Timing outweighed credentials. Those who understood when to speak and when to let others speak first guided outcomes without appearing to lead. Influence became quiet, indirect, and difficult to trace. The danger emerged when legitimacy lagged behind movement. Influential actors shaped results without formal responsibility. Their impact was visible only in hindsight, after markets had already moved. When outcomes failed, accountability struggled to keep pace. Influence had acted, but it left no signature. London's institutions felt the strain. Oversight frameworks assumed fixed actors and stable hierarchies. But influence now formed dynamically, shifting with context. By the time authority identified it, it had already relocated. Control chased shadows. Participants sensed imbalance. Trust weakened as influence appeared arbitrary. Why did some signals move markets while others vanished? Why did outcomes favor certain voices without explanation? Influence felt powerful, but unpredictable. The city realized it was facing a new challenge. Influence that travels freely can coordinate faster than command, but it can also escape scrutiny. Without anchors, movement turns opaque, and opacity erodes confidence. London was approaching a critical inflection point. If influence could move without permission, it would also need boundaries that could move with it, or risk becoming the most destabilizing force of all. The conflict surfaced when mobile influence collided with moments of consequence. As long as outcomes were positive, movement felt efficient. But when decisions amplified risk or produced loss, the absence of visible authority became impossible to ignore. Influence had acted, but no one could point to where it came from. Markets reacted first. Participants began questioning signals after following them. Why did this assumption spread? Who initiated that alignment? Influence, once subtle, now felt unsettling. It shaped behavior without explanation, leaving uncertainty in its wake. Institutions attempted to respond, but their tools were mismatched. Influence no longer resided in roles or organizations. It emerged from coordination across networks that formed and dissolved rapidly. By the time oversight arrived, the moment of impact had already passed. Inside London, tension grew between those who benefited from mobile influence and those exposed to its consequences. Some firms mastered the art of timing, nudging behavior without formal responsibility. Others bore losses triggered by movements they never fully understood. The imbalance bred resentment. The breaking point came when a widely followed signal proved catastrophically wrong. Alignment had been near total. Confidence was high, and yet the outcome collapsed under pressure. When the dust settled, there was no single decision to investigate, only a pattern of collective movement. Public trust faltered. If influence could move markets without accountability, what restrained it? The system appeared vulnerable not to manipulation, but to momentum itself. Ideas gained force simply because they spread quickly. London confronted a dangerous truth. Influence that travels faster than responsibility creates instability. When movement outruns scrutiny, error multiplies before correction can intervene. The city now faced a defining challenge. Either influence would learn to slow, or responsibility would learn how to move just as fast. The resolution came through making influence visible without immobilizing it. London accepted that influence would continue to travel, but it could no longer do so anonymously. The city focused on creating traces that followed movement, allowing impact to be understood even after momentum passed. New norms began to form. Signals carried attribution. Alignment required disclosure. Those who benefited from influence accepted responsibility for its effects. Influence was still indirect, but it was no longer invisible. Movement gained memory. This shift changed behavior. Signals slowed slightly, not from regulation, but from awareness. Knowing that influence could be examined encouraged restraint. Momentum became deliberate rather than reflexive. Speed remained, but it carried weight. Institutions adapted by tracking patterns rather than individuals. Accountability followed flows, not titles. Oversight learned to observe coordination itself, identifying when alignment became dangerous. Responsibility reattached to influence, not by force, but by expectation. London absorbed a lasting lesson. Influence does not need to be controlled to be credible. It needs to be legible. When movement leaves traces, trust can follow it. When it doesn't, confidence erodes. The city moved forward with a new balance. Influence could travel, but it could no longer disappear without explanation. In a world where power moves fast, legitimacy must learn to move with it. Subscribe to join the journey. How